All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick are going to be breaking down our 2022 season preview for the Arkansas Razorbacks. Make sure you guys subscribe. We'll be doing this for all 65 Power 5 teams and a handful of Group of 5 teams. Looking at this coaching staff and some of the headlines of this offseason, Sam Pittman, he's back. 12-11 record through 2 seasons. Last year, obviously, immense success. He's back. The players love him. The fans love him. Sam Pittman, great find by Arkansas. Kendall Briles at the offensive coordinator spot. He stays with Arkansas. There were some rumblings, deep rumblings, I'd say, of him going to potentially be the offensive coordinator for Miami. He stays put, back for his 3rd year. And then Barry Odom, the former Missouri head coach, he's also back for his 3rd season. Arkansas, one of the big things Sam Pittman has done is recruiting. 3rd straight top 30 recruiting class. Arkansas is back to dominating in their own state. Landed 10 of the top 15 in Arkansas. For comparison, they only had 4 in 2020. Nick, what are your thoughts on some of the things I just said above?
Yeah, I really like Sam Pittman. I think he's a really solid coach. You look at that 12-11 record. It doesn't feel like a 12-11 record. It kind of feels like an 18-11 record. Just the way you look at some of these results, how close they had some of those games last year. They keep the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, keep that duo there. Briles, like you said, was linked with Miami. I think that would have been a good move for him, but he stays in Fayetteville, which I think is an even better fit. Odom's defense improved greatly last year. That defense looks really leaps and bounds better than it did 2 years ago. You bring in a guy like Sam Pittman than they did 2 years ago. You know, it seemed to be a gamble. Some people didn't know how they felt about it, but he fits perfectly there in Fayetteville. He loves the culture. The fans love him. I think that was a home run hire, and it's only getting better as the years progress. And he's sort of, with the recruiting progress going to 10, like you said, 10 out of the top 15 in the state of Arkansas, it's clear that the people like him, the players like him, the high school players in Arkansas want to stay in state. They want to stay at Fayetteville instead of leaving to go to states like Texas or Alabama or Louisiana. I think this was a great fit, and I like the way that they kept this little cohesion going and kept this coaching roster the same that it was last year.
Looking at the offense these guys implemented, it's an RPO-style offense. KJ Jefferson, Pittman last year said he didn't know if it was the right move, but he gave the kid his word. He was going to give him a shot, even if he got fired. I'd say it panned out pretty well. Very strong runner. He's got that Cam Newton-like frame, 6'3", 245. Ran for 660-plus yards last year, 6 scores. Also very effective with the football through the air. That's probably his best part of his game is how he can throw, just because he was able to showcase the ability to go through his progression. He dropped back immensely last year, and he had great success doing so. Very strong arm. Expect a big-time season from him. You know, last year only 4 picks, 21 touchdowns, completed 67%. This was also, Nick, a quite explosive passing attack for them, being very conservative. Looking at KJ Jefferson, how do you think he'll do this season, along with, Treylon Burks, his top pass catcher, leaving?
So Jefferson loses Burks, like you said, his top pass catcher to the draft, but I think there is still some potential here. They made some moves in the transfer portal, picked up a couple guys who can really sort of add some impact, and I actually really think that Jefferson will benefit greatly from the 2 running backs. We'll touch on them in a second. He's a very talented quarterback, like you said, that frame, sort of like Cam Newton. He limits the turnovers, only 4 interceptions last year, also 3,300 yards, very talented with the passing. It's going to be interesting to see if they kind of focus on the running a little bit more from this year, just because the weapons, like we said, are a bit depleted at pass catcher. See if someone can kind of step up and get into that as the season gets into its swing. But Jefferson's the starter, definitely in Fayetteville. Great quarterback. I think he's really great fit. I like the way that they build the offense around him. They've dedicated the offense to him. He's their guy. He's ready to go. I expect an improvement on him this year.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and focus on that passing game. Wide receiver is a bit of a concern. They have some guys they can get the ball to in one way or another. Jaden Hazelwood, they pick him up, former high-end 5-star recruit from Oklahoma. Didn't really pan out in Norman, but he's here. I think he's good for this offense with his downfield blocking ability. Hoping he can make an impact as a pass catcher. We'll wait and see. Warren Thompson, he's really the only productive one back. The next highest in receiving yards or receptions are the running backs that we'll touch on here. Keytron Jackson, he's a long strider, get downfield in a hurry. I think he could fill that role left by Burks because he's got a wide catch radius, nice body control. And then Isaiah Santiga, he's a Fayetteville native, a top 150 recruit they are able to keep in town. Another speed guy I think can make an impact, potentially on some screens downfield. What are your thoughts on this receiving core? Because it's really a concern, but they do have a quarterback that has a lot of confidence. So I think these things might pan out, especially with this style of offense.
I expect Warren Thompson to step up. He had a decent year last year. He ended up with about 16 yards per catch on his limited action and targets. I think Thompson's a talented wide receiver. Expect him to get the ball a lot this year. And like you said, they saw a need in the portal. They went on and got Jaden Hazelwood out of Oklahoma. Didn't really work out in Norman, but he comes in here, kind of adds a new breath of fresh air to him. Gets in Fayetteville, gets work with the quarterback. They recruit well, keeping guys in the town of Fayetteville, just the way to go. I think that, there's a lot of question marks to wide receivers. They definitely don't have a lot of experience, but if you can kind of get Thompson comfortable early, target him early on, and get some other guys into the game quickly. I like Jackson Jr. as well. He only had 5 catches, but he also averaged 19 yards on those 5 catches and a touchdown. I think he can have some impact early on, and maybe some of these lower guys who didn't have a whole lot of catches last year can start to pick them up early in the game, kind of get in the swing of things.
The fundamentals of this offense largely remain intact. Keep touching on Jefferson. He's a big part of the running game, but these 2 running backs, Raheem Sanders, Dom Johnson, they both had nearly 600 yards last year. Very similar production. Both are 225 pounds and run with authority. I think this might be one of the best short yardage groups in CFB with all the size they have in the backfield. They also get back 2 veteran tight ends in Hudson Henry and Trey Knox. And then you look at the running game. They get Ricky Stromberg back, a veteran, nasty run blocker, one of the best centers in the country. Dalton Wagner as well, 6'9", 330, veteran at left tackle. Pass pro is shaky at times. Too many negative plays for this offensive style, but this running game, 227 yards per game last season. I expect that to potentially get better or stay around the same. I don't expect to fall off one bit despite Traylon Smith heading to TCU.
I really like this running game. Like you said, it's a 2-headed monster. They put up similar numbers, Johnson and Sanders. I think they can both kind of complement each other, carry the ball when necessary. And like you said, this offensive line is very good with Stromberg at center being one of the best centers in the SEC. He's going to be a rock. He's going to be an anchor there. The offensive line's going to be good. They're going to give Jefferson all the time in the world they need. They're going to set up some nice blocks for these 2 running backs to kind of pick up the slack here. They're great in the short yardage, like you said, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3. They really know what they're doing there. And I think that the bouncing back and forth and swapping between 2 running backs will keep defense on their heels throughout this season.
I just mentioned Dalton Wagner, about 6'9", 330, veteran left tackle. I like this group all around. I think this offense is in for a good show this year. Very confident what they can do on the ground. We'll see what happens in the receiving group. But I think you're certainly going to see some leaps compared to last season, especially in Jefferson's development. Looking at this defense, the higher-powered offenses just had a field day with this defense, but they were still immensely improved. 513 yards per game allowed in 4 losses. But more telling was the 7.5 yards per play. They just seemed so lifeless against the Alabama run game, the Alabama pass. It was a struggle fest at times, but they did get much better, mainly due to the ability to get off the field. Went from 110th to 15th in opponent third down conversion rate, 13th best in the red zone. Really brought that points per game margin down. They replaced numerous starters in the front 7, but some of the things I just said are very telling, and I think that you're not going to see a massive fall off in those categories, Nick.
I look at it and they bring in a lot of guys from the transfer portal, like you said, Landon Jackson, Drew Sanders, very talented players, and they keep a lot of those guys who are leading the team in tackles around, which I think is a really good fit. It definitely was concerning at times. They struggled, especially early in the season, to get off the field. The defense gave a lot of points. They played a lot of shootouts against Ole Miss, against Alabama. So it's interesting to see if they can kind of slow that down a little bit, have sort of a transitional here to not give up those 42 points, something like that, in a game against Ole Miss or a game against Alabama, and kind of keep that tempo and get the defense off the field quicker.
Yeah, Trey Williams and Grant Morgan, 2 of the notables they lose. They also lost John Ridgeway, I'm pretty sure was drafted. Williams, this guy's explosion off the edge was phenomenal last year. Big time loss in the pass rushing department. Grant Morgan's loss, not as massive because Bumper Pool is back. They also picked up 5-star Drew Sanders from Alabama. His versatility might see him come off the edge even. 6'5", 232. Had the athleticism to play pass catcher. Meaning he should be fluid, has some leverage, and some IQ and coverage. They run a variety of schemes here, Barry Odom does, but whichever scheme they run is going to feature these 2 linebackers who are really good. Poole, he was one of 3 linebackers that had 100-plus tackles last year. The pass rush, though, they were just fairly solid, I thought, just inconsistent. They had 0 sacks across that mid-season 3-game losing streak. And again, Williams off the edge, big loss. So no real edge presence last year outside of Trey Williams. Interested to see what happens this year. I like how they did get Zach Williams and Eric George in the rotation last year. They're probably going to see significant time this year. I think Terry Hampton, hard worker on the interior, Arkansas State transfer, that's a player to look out for. What are your final thoughts on this front 7, though, heading into 2022?
They lose Trey Williams. They lose the 6 sacks and the 6.5 tackles for loss that come with that. And you look at Bumper Pool, a guy who led the team in tackles with 125 tackles and 7.5 for loss, but he had 0 sacks. You want to see if you maybe can pick that number up. Bumper Pool is a leader in the locker room. The players rally around him. He's a energetic figure. He's fun with the press. They did a segment on him on SEC Network that was really cool, where he was playing pool with an analyst in the locker room. Very fun guy. And I think that he should be sort of that step up and have that leadership role that the team needs. He'll guide those younger players that come in, those transfers. Drew Sanders is a big one coming from Alabama. Couldn't quite find the playing time in Tuscaloosa, so he hops over to another team in the SEC West. He should make a big impact immediately. I like what they've done in the portal. I think that's good recruiting from them. I think this defense can take a step up potentially this year.
Yeah, Landon Jackson, I think he's certainly going to be thrusted into the lineup. The run defense was just really shaky last year. That physicality they showed week 2 against Texas, it didn't hold truly in the trenches for most of the season like we thought it would. In that 3-game losing streak was a big example of that. Moving to the secondary, they weren't terrible. They just really struggled to cover, especially against Alabama. 8-man drops, and they were still letting Jamison Williams over top. It was absolutely ridiculous. With Monteric Brown, he's now gone. Got schooled. He was one of their best DBs in that game. I do think this is a revamped safety group. Miles Slusher in for a breakout year potentially. Latavius Brin, the UGA transfer, not much help in the coverage department. He's a leader, comes from a winning program, really gets through blocks and makes tackles well on screens and whatnot. Those are 2 players I'm really excited about, but more importantly, Jalen Catalong, one of the nation's top safeties, a downhill thumper, great IQ and coverage. He also can cover with range. I love Jalen Catalong. How do you feel about this back end?
I like Latavius Brin coming in from Georgia, like you said, has experience as playing for a winning program. I also look at a guy like Trent Gordon, a bit inexperienced in that nickel area, but I think he has real potential to step up. He could be a huge player by the end of the season. I really like what Trent Gordon can provide. And you touch on Jalen Cantalone. I think he's a very talented player. He should get a starting role this year. I've seen some depth charts put him as a backup. I don't agree with that. I think you agree with me as well. He should probably start this season. He's a very talented player. But bringing in a guy from Georgia and Brinney, I think that's a solid fit, and I think that'll be a great pickup.
Yeah, Ladarius Bishop, he was on great man coverage. That's one corner. Dwight McGlover, he transfers in. Not really good laterally as an athlete, but has some ball skills. So this corner group kind of iffy on. And then one of the DBs, Simeon Blair. He was too much of a liability in the back end last year. It seemed like he gave up a numerous amount of big plays. The secondary I'm really concerned about. I do think the safety group, though, has a lot of potential. So we'll see what happens there. Slusher, again, the guy I think will break out. We'll see what kind of coverages they roll out with this personnel they have. Pretty excited to see that early on in the season. What's your final thoughts on this defense before we move to our record prediction?
I think this defense has potential to take a nice step forward here. I look at Bumper Poole. I think he has a lot. I really like a lot about him. I think he's just a leader in that locker room. The defense relies on him. Sam Pittman relies on him. I just worry a little bit about the secondary. We touched on it just now. I don't really know who's going to be making the plays there. I think Trent Gordon has potential to step up. I think he's a name we could look at towards the second half of the season. But in general, there's no names that really jump off the paper here for me, and I'm really interested to see who can step up and make those plays.
Yeah, outside of Poole and Catalan, I think those guys will both compete for first-team honors in the SEC. Other than that, though, it'll be interesting to see who steps up. But I have some faith in this coaching staff. They did it last year, turned a lot of heads with their success. Moving to the schedule prediction, they start the year with Cincinnati at home. I think they'll win that one. What a heck of a game that would have been last year. I think they'll lose week 2 to South Carolina, a home game. A very tough matchup against Spencer Rattler in the Shane Beamer game-led Gamecocks. They have a 5-game stretch here from September 24th to October 29th. It's brutal. A&M, Bama. And then they have 3 straight road games against some pretty good football teams. They don't play a true road game until October 8th. So they could potentially have more wins going into this road stretch. Probably not, considering they play A&M and Alabama. What are your thoughts about this 5-game stretch? And do you think they can win any of those 5 games?
I feel terrible for Arkansas when I look at their schedule sometimes. They get a brutal SEC West, and then they play Missouri in their crossover game, who would be good, and they go out and schedule Cincinnati, which is no cupcake from the group of 5. They were in the playoff last year, for crying out loud. But I look at that 5 games that we're talking about, A&M, Alabama State, BYU, and Auburn. I think the one game that kind of shouts out to me as potential they could win is definitely Mississippi State on October 8th. We don't really know what to expect out of Mississippi State. There could be some question marks there. And I also think Auburn's a winnable game as well, but just if it was anywhere else in that schedule, maybe it was the second game, I'd definitely give Arkansas the edge. But playing Auburn in the 5th game of that brutal stretch, they're going to be tired. They're going to be wiped out. That might be a tough. Auburn can definitely catch them off guard at Jordan Hare. This is a very tough schedule from top to bottom. When you go out and schedule Cincinnati, when you play South Carolina from the East, who's going to be a really strong team in the East this year, there's really doesn't seem like there's a lot of free wins on this schedule for Arkansas. They're going to be battling week in, week out. It's going to be a tough season for them on the schedule for sure.
Yeah, their record could be 8-4, could be 4-6. It's a really tough schedule like last year. I think the defense will certainly take a step backwards. Not really confident in the ability to cover underneath either in the secondary we just talked about. I think Jalen Catalong with Latavius Brin will definitely help the run defense. They're going to have some more authority downhill. The pass rush, I'm not so certain about. Pittman, a good coach. I'm rooting for him. I just see 6-6. That tough 3-game road stretch specifically comes right after A&M and Alabama. I think this offense will be very powerful. Excited to see how their pass catchers get involved. I think KJ Jefferson's in for a big season. I do think they lose a lot of close games, though. They could easily be an 8-9 win team. 6-6 is the final verdict, and that includes a 4-game winning streak down the stretch. It'll be very tough to see them be, 2-6 at one point in the season. The team will be too good to be that record, but it's very realistic that it happens. They might take one off the Mississippi State or Auburn. 6-6 though. That's my final prediction.
This team should definitely push towards bowl eligibility. They should be knocking right on the door of that. 7-5, 6-6, right in that wheelhouse. 8-4 is definitely a possibility if they get that game against State. They get a game against Auburn, but they're going to struggle against BYU on the road. They're going to struggle at home to Alabama. They're going to struggle in Jerry's World against Texas A&M, and they're going to struggle against South Carolina at home. Even though it's at home, Shane Beamer's team is a great team this year. It's going to be a tough one for sure.
Yeah, and of course they did beat A&M last year, but A&M didn't really have a quarterback, and they could also win September 10th at home against South Carolina. So there's certainly games on here that are winnable for them. Again, they could win as many as 8 or 9, and they could also win as few as 4. So be interesting to see what happens. This was fun, Nick. Appreciate you joining me.
Thank you as always. Yeah.
Make sure you guys like, comment who you want to see next, subscribe for all the teams. See you next time.